Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the three main type of bullets and in what applications you should use them in. Ideally, most people want controlled expansion, pretty good weight retention, and good penetration. So in today's video, we're going to look at different scenarios of when to use some of the tougher bullets to some of the softer bullets. Now I'm going to make an assumption here that those watching want controlled expansion and want the penetration and decent weight retention. Now, so I'm not really going to address the idea of a bullet just exploding on game as a positive. I know there's a number of people that do like that, but we're just going to talk about how to avoid explosive expansion in all of these bullets, or penciling through, as some of these bonded and mono bullets get a reputation for. So what I want to show you is a paper I made of what velocities to use certain bullets at, whether it's a mono bullet, a bonded bullet, or a cup and core bullet. Now remember guys, this is just my opinion. I am not sharing the gospel of bullet performance. And what I like to remind people is it's my opinion. An opinion is, well, like a butt. Everyone has them and they all stink. Let's first address muzzle velocity. This is kind of my goal whenever I'm doing load development or looking for factory ammo for someone or myself. If I'm going to use a monolithic bullet, velocity is very helpful for a mono bullet. Anything over 3,000 feet per second is a big plus. I would even put my limit probably at 2,900. At least when I hand load, I really try to get something over 2,900 if I'm going to use a mono bullet. 2,800, yeah, probably will work, but basically anything 2,800 feet per second and lower, yeah, that's a no-go for me, muzzle velocity wise, with a mono bullet, especially as they get heavier. Then you might have that unfortunate penciling through. Now let's go to bonded. Bonded are kind of a happy medium, but they still definitely need velocity. So anything over 3,000 feet per second, absolutely. 2,900, yep. 2,800, yeah, I'm fine with 2,800. And then I think you really start to see some not so good things if your muzzle velocity is 2,700 feet per second and below with a bonded bullet, especially if you want to reach out a little bit further. Let's get to the cup and core. Anything over 3,000 feet per second, I would say is pretty likely your bullet is going to explode on expansion. Okay, 2,900 feet per second, yeah, that's a no-go for me. 2,800, yeah, it's probably fine. And I think its sweet spot is a little bit slower in the 2,700 feet per second. So if you have to take a 50-yard shot, you know that bullet's not going to explode on impact. The next thing I want to cover with expansion is downrange velocity, where these really ideally expand well. Now, most of these are all basically rated down to 1,800 feet per second, but you're barely getting expansion from a mono bullet at 1,800 feet per second, and it's only a little bit better with a bonded bullet. So that's not kind of what I would recommend, but again, just my opinion. So with a mono bullet, you're still good with expansion, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. I think it starts getting a little iffy once you get down to 23. And honestly, again, my personal preference, if something's 2,200 feet per second and lower, you're going to get hardly any expansion. So that's kind of where I limit the mono bullet. Let's see, with the bonded, again, you're going to get great expansion at the higher velocities. And I do think you get a little bit more forgiveness with a bonded bullet, but they're actually pretty similar. For me, I kind of am a little iffy if it going below 2,200 feet per second. I have tested the AccuBond down to 2,100, but I hit a water jug, which is like hitting a really hard piece of bone. So it expanded pretty darn well, but sometimes you're not always hitting bone, okay? So anything close to 2,000 feet per second and definitely below that, I, I, I wouldn't recommend a bonded bullet at those velocities. Finally, cup and core, again at 2,900, 2,800 feet per second, I think your bullet's going to get explosive results, which I know some of you really want. At 2,700, I think you're starting to get where it still holds together and penetrates really well. But down at like 2,500 and all the way down to like 1,900 feet per second, I think is your real sweet spot with any cup and core bullet. Now I just want to go through and give you some scenarios of, the different type of cartridges and the bullets that you might want to use if you want that controlled expansion and really good penetration. Okay, so starting out with a Speed Demon 300 Weatherby 200 grain AccuBond. If you're ever wondering why I'm such a huge fan of monolithic bullets and bonded bullets, well, I'm shooting Weatherbys. And so I don't think that the cup and core bullets are going to hold up to the Weatherby velocities. So I've hand loaded this to 3,100 feet per second, and these numbers are going to be at sea level with one exception to one cartridge. So this is the slowest you would ever see it. Again, where I hunt, I'm going to have much faster velocities at 9,000, 10,000 feet. But for me, I'm still really good out to 400 yards with a bonded bullet. It's still going almost 2,500 feet per second. I'm still going to get really good expansion. Now let's look at a cup and core bullet. I'm using data from Hunt Simple. Guys, if you haven't heard of Hunt Simple, please go subscribe to his channel. He produces really, really good content. But he has hand-loaded his 308 Winchester with a 178 grain ELDX at 2,600 feet per second. And with these velocities, yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend shooting a bonded or a TTS type bullet, a mono bullet out of a 308 Winchester at a 180 grain. Just looking at 400 yards, you're already at 2,000 feet per second. I'm not sure I would trust a mono bullet expanding very well at 2,000 feet per second. So I understand why he would pick an ELDX with his 308 Win with this heavy of a bullet, because he will still get great expansion. He's not going to have it explode unless he hits bone at close distances, and he's going to have pretty darn good expansion at further distances out to 400. Okay, we're going back to a Speed Demon. This one, yeah, I would never use a cup and core bullet in my 257 Weatherby. I mean, you can get like a 115 grain ballistic tip or a 110 grain ELDX, but when you're shooting them at these blistering velocities, there's no way those bullets are going to hold up. And so, for example, I've shot a 101 grain LRX, yeah, well over 3650, but let's just say 3650. Even at 400 yards, this bullet's going like 2,650 feet per second. That's plenty enough to expand. And any close-up shots, I know the LRX will hold up. It will most likely shed its petals, but it's not just going to grenade on impact like, say, an ELDX at 3,500 feet per second. All right, I did say there was one exception with the whole being all at sea level. This is my buddy's 30-06 hand load I did for him. He's shooting a 168 grain TTSX, and I really wanted him to get over 2,900, and so he got right at 2,933. I think we could hit 3,000 feet per second if we really pushed it, but this load's really consistent for him. It's a great shooting, very accurate load. And I did this data at 7,500 feet, which is the elevation we hunted at this year, which was kind of low. We were usually at like 9,000 to 10,000 feet. But even out to 400 yards, yeah, I would probably say 400 is probably his limit that he would want to shoot with this TTSX to make sure it has plenty of expansion. I still think it should expand decently well still out to 400 yards, but that's probably about his limit with the 30-06 and this bullet. For anyone that's been following my series with my Mark V Deluxe and my 340 Weatherby Magnum, I've been shooting a lot of the 250 grain AccuBond, and I've had some pretty good accuracy results from Vihtavuori N560. And, I was all ready to just go with this load. And then I made sure to see how fast it was really going, because GRT says it was going to be going like 29-15 feet per second, which again, gave me a thumbs up, like that's fast enough for this AccuBond to expand. And then the real world results were much slower. Initially, it was like high 2700, and the fastest I've seen it go with N560 with good accuracy was 2800. And on top of me being like, it's not the ideal velocity for me to have this AccuBond expand, it's also like, man, I just bought like a 340 Weatherby and it's shooting like a hot 338 Win Mag velocities. So bare minimum, I want 2,900 feet per second, and I can get that with N560, but it's just not accurate. So a couple weeks ago, I did some load development with H4831SC, and I got a pretty decent group, and I'm pretty confident it's going to be well over 2,900 feet per second. And so I just need to get these tested for velocity and make sure these still shoot well. But ideally, I would love it to be like 2,950. That's just really kind of my process with these is if I'm going to shoot a heavier bonded bullet, I want velocity. Now, there is one more type of bullet. There is a hybrid bullet where you've got a soft core, cup and core up front, and then you have this partition. So others call it an A-frame. Nozzler calls it the partition. And, it's so freaking effective for killing. You get the best of both worlds. You get your rapid expansion and you get really good penetration. But the downside to the partition or an A-frame, they're really expensive and they're just not as accurate as the modern bullets. Ideally, I would love to see Nozzler make a updated partition, maybe in a high BC version with a boat tail, and make it look sexy. And then you have basically your perfect bullet. You get really good expansion and good weight retention, and it's not going to fall apart if it hits a bone or at high velocities. We'll see. I don't think Nozzler's going to do it, but someone should. It'd be pretty sweet.